All right, as part of our conclusion for colonization, we're going to talk about the fall of the Aztec and Incan empires thanks to the Spanish and Portuguese. First things first, just a quick review about how we got here. We know that Mr. Chris Columbus initially asked both Spain and Portugal to sponsor his voyage, although Spain is the only one who agreed with Ferdinand and Isabella, the ones that finance it. Portugal kind of realized they messed up because they saw the wealth that Spain was gaining from their colonization exploration, and of course they wanted part of the action, because who wouldn't with all the money coming in? So the countries became big rivals and tried to stop each other from claiming land in the Americas. In 1494, the countries agreed to the Treaty of Tordesillas, thanks to a little intervention from the Pope, and what this did was it set the line of demarcation. You probably recall that from your vocabulary list, and what it was the imaginary line from the North Pole to the South Pole at 50 degrees longitude, and just divided everything evenly between Spain and Portugal. Now, if you remember that map I showed you, it looked like it heavily favored Spain, but remember, a lot of the area in Europe that included was already settled permanently, so there was nowhere to colonize. Thus, through everything, the split was relatively even. Spain gets everything to the west, Portugal got everything to the east. And we see the effects of that even in modern day. Consider the language that is spoken in most of Latin America, and then consider the language that is spoken in Brazil. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese. And here is a map. It's a little bit different from the one that we saw, but it emphasizes the difference in territory of Spain and Portugal. You see Spain has a majority of the Midwest of the United States, the Southwest, almost all of Central America, and the western portion of South America, while Portugal gets that big cut, which is now Brazil. Now, the conquistadors come into play, and from your vocab, you know they are the Spanish, the soldier explorers who settled in the Americas in hopes of finding treasure. They were inspired by Columbus to seek fortune in the New World, as many people were. And they came from a part of Spain called Extremadura, and there it was poor soil, very cold and icy winters, but blistering hot summers, and they held little chance for wealth because of the extreme conditions. It was either very cold or very hot. It's not great for farming. And our dear friend Hernan Cortez was born in this province. Cortez himself was a conquistador who reached Mexico in 1519 in search of treasure. Yes, that's kind of cliche, but it was true. He arrived with 550 soldiers, 16 horses, 14 cannons, and, of course, a few dogs, because you need man's best friend when you're going to conquer a whole civilization of people. The group was met by the Aztec Emperor Montezuma II, and poor Montezuma assumed that they were gods. And you can see here the Aztec Empire, pretty decent portion of southern Mexico. Tenochtitlan, the city right there, is current-day Mexico City, and that was the capital of the Aztec Empire. The question, how could such a small force conquer such a huge empire? Keep in mind, we're talking about 550 people versus an entire civilization. Well, Cortez knew how to use Spanish horses and guns to shock the Aztecs. We talked about this a few weeks ago, where horses were not native to America, so when they were brought over, they were kind of scary because it's like, who is this, or what is this beast that these people are riding on, I don't know. It's scary. And then we come across Malitzin. She was a Mayan woman, and she gave Cortez the inside scoop on the Aztec Empire and helped him form alliances against Montezuma. Bad call on her part. Cortez also had invisible help because, as we know, when the Europeans come over, there is that difference of immune systems, and the diseases killed more Aztecs than Spanish swords, which is pretty incredible to think about. But at this point in time, it of course was not common for people to travel from continent to continent, so different cultures did not have that immunity to certain diseases. And like I said earlier, Montezuma believed Cortez to be Quetzalcoatl, which was an important Aztec god. And unfortunately for them, that wasn't the case. And here is a painting of Cortez meeting Montezuma. You see here Cortez looking all civilized and European, prim and proper, giving gifts to the Aztecs. And even the Aztecs are painted in a way that makes them seem like they are civilized in the European sense, that they are not savages. Cortez travels 500 miles to reach modern-day Mexico City, back then known as Tenochtitlan. Montezuma did not attack right away because he first thought Cortez was Quetzalcoatl, the god. The Spanish were able to take control of the city and took Montezuma hostage because the Spanish had a wealth of power and they had that secret knowledge. Then Cortez ordered the Aztec to stop sacrificing people. As you may have heard either last year or maybe in elementary school, that was a very important part of Aztec culture, was the sacrifice. They believed that by sacrificing a certain amount of people to the gods during a very strict and bloody ritual, that they would be safe from their god's wrath, and they would be protected from evil spirits and so forth. And these were very, like I said, bloody ceremonies, but it was not seen as something that was gruesome. It was seen as something that was necessary and almost an honor to be sacrificed for your people in the name of God. But the Europeans did not see it this way, so they decided to put an end to it. So Cortez orders obviously angered the Aztecs, who plan a rebellion. Large-scale fighting breaks out. Montezuma is killed. The Spanish finally are outnumbered, so they flee the city, fearing for their lives. But unfortunately for the Aztecs, before they could prepare a second attack, a second wave, smallpox broke out, and it greatly weakened the empire. Smallpox is a very deadly disease, and it is still around today. In fact, after the 9/11 attacks, there was a huge worry in the U.S. that the next type of attack was going to be the release of smallpox somewhere in the U.S. Because it has the ability to kill thousands and millions very quickly. By 1521, the Spanish destroy the Aztec capital, claim it for themselves, and they hold on to it for a very long time. You can see here it's kind of a pixelated drawing, but you see the fighting nonetheless. So after conquering the Aztecs, Cortez took part in one more expedition. He went to Honduras, which is in Central America, and he served as the Governor General of New Spain. Naturally, returned to Spain a very wealthy man from all the riches that they took from the Aztecs, and died in Spain in 1547. and he's famous enough that we talk about him to this very day. Our next buddy is Francisco Pizarro, which you are familiar with, both from this unit and the previous one. He was also from the Extremadura. He was not of noble birth, though. In fact, he was illiterate. He couldn't even write his name. And at age 16, he fled a job herding pigs in Italy. Doesn't sound like a great time to me either. In 1502, he arrives in the Americas and becomes very wealthy by exploring Panama, also in Central America. And with the times, he heard a rumor that there was a great empire filled with gold in the mountains of South America. Once again, we see the idea of gold driving exploration and, of course, colonization. So there is Pizarro. A little bit about the Inca. They thought they ruled most of the world in the 1530s. Keep in mind, this isn't exactly an ignorant thought, because it's fair to say that they didn't know Europe existed, much like Europe did not know North America and South America existed before Columbus and even before that. So give them the benefit of the doubt in this case. Two threats from the north proved they did not in terms of rule the world, and that was they couldn't stop the spread of smallpox, and they couldn't scare away Pizarro. So they were powerless until the Europeans came, which unfortunately is the case across the board. You see here the Incan Empire, Machu Picchu, probably the most famous city of the Inca Empire. It still exists today in some form. It's ruins at the very least. You can Google that after this if you'd like. It's pretty neat to look at. And Quito, which is in Ecuador, still around to this day, still a pretty popular tourist destination. So Pizarro and the Inca. He led only 160 soldiers to the Inca homeland, which is a very small number, but he managed to raid Inca storehouses and fired guns at villagers. Keep in mind, these people have never seen guns, so they were frightened immediately. It had a very immediate effect on the local population. So the Incan Empire, the Incan Emperor Atahualpa actually, thought Pizarro was crazy. How could he stand up to an army of 80,000 Incan warriors? And I think we both can infer how he was able to do it. Nevertheless, in 1532, he comes up with a plan. Can you guess what the plan is? You can. Oh, but first, there you go. Spanish messengers invited Atahualpa to a meeting. He agreed and left most of his army behind, and he brought only 5,000 bodyguards. Yes, I know, only 5,000 still seems like a lot, but in fact, when we're talking about 80,000, 5,000 is a very small number. So Pizarro's 160 soldiers attacked the Inca and kidnapped their emperor, Atahualpa. So Pizarro offered to free the emperor if he filled one room with gold and one with silver. Atahualpa kept his end of the bargain, which is very noble, because if you consider today, if someone made those types of demands, it's very easy to dismiss them and try to figure out a way to stop them anyway. But they were noble and honest, and they followed through with their word. But of course, the Europeans had a trick up their sleeve, and Pizarro ended up killing him in 1533. I know, we're not talking about the nicest people in the world. After conquering the Inca, the Spanish king made Pizarro the governor of Peru, and his conquest of Peru opened most of South America to Spanish rule. As we saw on the map earlier, that is most of the western portion of South America. Spain controlled a vast territory covering 375,000 miles and almost 7 million inhabitants. That is a lot of people to govern and to technically have power over.